So some different problems. So most of this we talked about as we went through as well. So tick, 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 or clicking noise. That's what we're going to get if we have a worn cam lobe or any sort of excess clearance in the system. Again, that noise can be intermittent. Most valve train noises are going to be loudest when it's cold because we have the most clearance. They'll get quieter as it warms up. If it's truly an intermittent noise, usually that's because the cam is actually moving back and forth. That cam end play issue that we talked about. Just looking at this engine, looking at all that sludge buildup. Has this been a very well-maintained engine?
No.
No, not at all. So on this engine, what actually happened was the push rod actually wore through the end of the rocker arm. So it just basically poked straight through. Well, think about lubrication. We get oil from our lifter, through our push rod, up to our rocker arm. With all this sludge happening, is there a possibility this push rod is just plugged solid? So if this push rod becomes plugged solid, what happens to lubrication between here and here? There basically isn't any, right? So it just wears completely through. So this thing at minimum needs a new push rod and rocker arm, but realistically there's probably a lot more wear and tear if we dig deeper into it, right? So here's some good information. It says most manufacturers consider valve ticking at 1/2 engine speed after startup to be normal, especially if it's quiet after 10 to 30 seconds. So that's basically that clearance when the engine's cold. After it warms up a little bit, that clearance starts to become taken out. Also, one thing that gets very commonly confused with valve train noise on newer engines is our fuel injectors. So our fuel injectors are solenoids. Those click on and off to open and close and allow fuel to spray or to stop the flow of fuel. Those will make basically that same clicking sound just like our valve train will. And usually those are a lot more exposed, so you're going to hear that noise a little bit easier. So another recommendation here, if we have valve train noise, make sure the vehicle has the right oil and the right oil filter. So especially true for a hydraulic valve train system. On some of these vehicles, having the wrong oil filter can cause valve train noise. So kind of similar to the oil pressure deal. If oil pressure is wrong, or if we have valve train noise, change the oil, make sure we have the correct oil filter, and then see what we have. Because we don't want to tear into an engine just simply because it had the wrong oil in it, right? Check our oil level, and low oil could lead to what we call aeration of the oil, where I actually get air bubbles in the oil. Air bubbles aren't going to allow those hydraulic lifters work properly, so that can lead to valve train noise. And then here's a whole host of other things to check. So valve lasher clearance too loose. So if we do have adjustable valve clearance, we need to check it. Could have worn cam lobes, worn or stuck lifters, worn rocker arms, rocker arm shafts, push rods, valve springs, valves. So basically, if we've checked the oil's good. If the clearance is adjustable, and that's okay. Now we're really gonna have to start tearing into the engine and inspecting parts, right? Seeing what's actually worn. So here's just another example of the way that rocker arms are mounted. This is one where we have two shafts that all the rocker arms mount to. This is used on some overhead valve engines. This is also used on some overhead cam engines. If we do have rocker arm shafts, this is where the lubrication is usually a little bit different. So generally the oil comes up into the rocker arm shafts, and then from the shafts it lubricates all the rocker arms and all the valves. So if this were an overhead valve engine, this is where we would most likely have solid push rods, because we're not relying on the push rods to bring the oil up. It's coming from the shaft itself. Another thing that's really important is if you deal with an engine like this, be very careful in terms of keeping track of those bolts. Because in a lot of these, the way oil gets into the rocker arm shaft is one of those bolts is hollow. So the oil comes up through the bolt into the shaft. So if you accidentally stuck a solid bolt in that spot, what happens to oil flow? None, right? So really important that the bolts go in the right place.